Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video I'm going to be taking the Ford Ranger off-road, and because I'm taking it off-road I have to drive quite a distance to get to the off-roading location. So in today's video we are going to be doing our kind of like city point of view drive slash test, and then also our highway driving and testing. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory, so we're going to take the Ranger out. It's about an hour drive to get to the off-roading location, so we'll get a ton of city driving and a ton of highway driving so you guys can see the fuel economy in both situations, and then I'll kind of talk about how the truck drives. But let's get straight into the video. We are starting the video with the around town driving first and foremost, and I don't want this to be a crazy long video. I did the Canyon POV recently, and that one was only about 9 minutes long. I feel like that was a pretty good run time, so we're gonna try to do the same thing with this particular video. But first off, let's talk about how the truck drives around town. So first off, again, I'm at about 4,500 feet elevation for most of my day-to-day driving, and this turbocharged 2.3 liter four-cylinder does great around town. You get up to speed, no problem whatsoever. It has decent passing power, again, when you're in around town driving and all that kind of stuff. And it actually gets pretty good fuel economy. So I've been averaging 19.8 miles per gallon. Now there is a little bit of highway driving in that, but the majority of it is around town driving. And that's not like really light throttle driving. Like there have been some times where I've floored it, obviously, and past people and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I feel like it's a pretty good mix of driving overall that I've done around town. And so yeah, I feel like it's giving me a pretty good feel for the truck. You guys will notice that right now we're at the light, the auto stop starts on, and then boom, truck just popped on. Super seamless system, works great, and it's not super intrusive or anything like that, but again, you can turn it off if you don't like it. But aside from all that kind of stuff, what's the truck actually like to drive? It's really smooth around town. When you go over manhole covers, all that kind of stuff, it doesn't upset the truck. It's really small, and so it's easy to fit into parking spaces. It's easy to maneuver, all that kind of stuff. All the daily driver minutia stuff is great in this truck. It has blind spot monitoring, which is great. I would definitely recommend getting blind spot monitoring on the Ranger. The one thing that I noticed about this truck is it does have a couple areas where you definitely do have blind spots that larger trucks don't really have, and so the blind spot monitoring has definitely been a good thing to have, because I've noticed like the light will be on and I won't really be able to see the car all that well, and so definitely like that system. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's super easy to drive. The safety tech's great. I did turn off the lane departure assistance, but that's just out of personal preference. I hate that system. It's really easy to turn off. There's just a button at the end of this. You guys can see my finger right here. There's just a button at the end of that stalk. You just hold that down and that turns it off. Easiest system to turn off. Most car manufacturers make you do basically turn off in the infotainment system. Ford just makes it really accessible. And so I guess my final thoughts on the Ranger is kind of like a daily driver type truck around town wise. It's great. It's the perfect size. It has more than enough power, and around town driving really is going to be from roughly, obviously, 5 miles an hour, really slow zones, which are really non-existent, but it's mostly going to be you're driving between 5 miles an hour and up to 50 miles an hour. The truck does fantastic. It's smooth, it's nice, it gets good fuel economy, and so yeah, I mean, it's great. And if you guys are wondering, when we get onto the interstate, I will reset the fuel economy so then you guys can see what the fuel economy is just driving on the interstate. So we just got onto the highway with the Ranger, and first off, let's talk about how the road noise and the ride quality is when we are on the interstate. So from a ride quality perspective, it's actually really smooth for a mid-sized truck. And again, that's the thing that I love about off-road vehicles, is their shocks just absorb everything a lot nicer compared to vehicles that are built just for the street. And so it's just really smooth. And again, with this turbocharged 2.3 liter, it's fine power-wise. Now, you're not going to win any drag races or anything like that, unless it's against some really slow cars like Honda Civics. But against most normal cars, it'll keep up, but it's not like you're going to just be like flying past them crazy fast. But I mean, you can get up to speed, and it's really easy to stay up to speed as well. And when you're having to climb hills and all that kind of stuff, it's not an issue whatsoever with this truck. Now, I will give you guys a fuel economy reading at the end. This is just the start, so this isn't going to be super accurate until we've put some miles on the interstate. But for most of the driving I've done with this truck so far, I've been able to average in the low to mid 20s on the interstate, so kind of like in that 22 to 24 miles per gallon range. But we'll see what this ends up being after we do a bunch of interstate driving in today's video. And then the one thing I do want to mention is because this is a mid-size truck, again, the size is really nice. It's really easy to stay in your lane. When you do need to change lanes, it's really easy, a lot easier compared to a full-size truck because you just don't have nearly as much, like you can kind of fit into spaces a lot easier. We're a little bit further along on the interstate. I did fill up with a little bit of gas just because I'm not sure how much we're going to use while off-roading today. But so far we've been averaging 22.4 miles per gallon. And like I said, that's usually what I was getting, is low to mid 20s. Now, most of this has been in ascent because we do have to climb up a little bit in elevation to get to the off-roading location. And so I think that's really good fuel economy wise for most of the driving being going uphill basically. But some other stuff that I do want to mention here with the Rangers, the 10-speed automatic is really good at finding the right gear in terms of what you're wanting to do from an acceleration standpoint. So like if you just want to lightly accelerate, it just like, it's perfect with the throttle modulation to the gear shift. And that's one of the benefits of having so many gears, is you can just go into the right gear to have the perfect amount of power for what you want. So for example, like if I just, you guys probably notice right there, I just like barely went in and it downshifted a couple gears and then went up. But then if I want to go like full throttle, it'll do the whole full throttle thing, and it's just really quick, seamless, just works really good. And we lost fuel economy by a pretty substantial margin by doing that. But yeah, so far the truck is great. And then one thing I do want to mention as well is going on these like lower speed roads. So most of the roads were about 70 to 80 miles an hour initially, but now we're kind of in the 60 to 70 mile an hour range for most of the roads. The truck seems to be really at home on these roads. At the really high speed roads, when you like punch it, I mean, it's at that point where you're getting to the upper limit of the speed of the truck, and so then it doesn't pull crazy hard. But when you're like 50 miles an hour and then punch it, definitely feels fast. And so I feel like this is like the perfect speed range for it, and where you'd have really good passing power still. We're going along a little bit further, and I do have the adaptive cruise control on at this point, which is really nice. Gives my foot a break. And if you guys don't know, I had a 2020 Raptor for just over a year, and the adaptive cruise control system in the Ranger, super similar to the Raptor, works great. The follow function's really precise, and even when you have inclement weather, the sensor stays uncovered for a really long period of time. Again, that was my experience with my Raptor, and so I'm sure with the Ranger it's pretty similar. And I mean, so far the system's been really great. It's been completely seamless. I love adaptive cruise control. It's something that I personally use pretty much on a daily basis, especially when I'm on the interstate, so that again I can give my leg a rest. And yeah, I mean, like I said, systems, it's just really nice. Well, up until this last part, our fuel economy jumped up to 24 miles per gallon, but still, I mean, mid-20s, I think that is just really good from a fuel economy standpoint. And the reason the fuel economy is going down, we are going uphill, and the wind is blowing at us. And so, yeah, we're fighting against quite a bit just to stay up at speed. But the truck's still at really low RPMs. Like if I go over to the RPM gauge right over here, we're just chilling at about 2,000 RPM. So it's like, even though we have the wind blowing at us and we're going uphill slightly, the truck still isn't struggling whatsoever from a power perspective to stay up to speed. But let's kind of get into summing things up now with this highway driving and with the around town driving. So first off, let's talk about the around town driving, and I'll have the fuel economy meter so that we can give the last reading before we stop. So with the around town driving, like I said, the small size is great because it's easy to fit into parking spaces, it's easy to do lane changes around town, and just overall it's just easy to drive. And if you have like more narrow roads, this truck's a lot easier to drive on, and you guys will see that in my off-road review. That's going to help out a bunch. And then fuel economy on road, in terms of the around town use, has been pretty good for me. I've been averaging kind of high teens typically, depending on how much I get into the throttle. And then in terms of the interstate, the truck's really smooth. It's got decent passing power up till about like 60, 70 miles an hour. But if you're any higher than that, definitely does slow down a bit. So just take that into consideration with the truck. But I mean, most places, you're really not going to need that much more passing power than what this already has. So I mean, you're super good with that. And I guess you guys will get a little bit of sneak peek onto the off-roading, because we are going to be popping over onto this trail for the first part of our off-road review. But yeah, the truck's really smooth on the interstate, and yes, we don't have to go into any off-road driving modes. This truck's that good. But anyways, the truck's really smooth on the interstate with the ride quality, and it's quiet. You get a little bit of wind noise, but I would rate that at average. Road noise is about average as well. And so just overall, it's great. The adaptive cruise control is great. The blind spot monitoring helps out a ton. And again, like I said, with the size, it's easy to change lanes and fit into the lane where someone else is. And so just overall, it's really, it just lends to a really easy experience when you are taking it onto the interstate and all that. And so what I'd have to say is, compared to other mid-sized trucks, I definitely think this one is the nicest on the interstate. What I would say is, like a Gladiator, obviously because you can take off half the parts, it makes so much noise. And then the other trucks, because they have naturally aspirated engines, they just don't have the passing power that this truck has. And so then this one, between the fact that you can't take off all the doors like the Gladiator, so it feels way better put together, and it doesn't make all the crazy rattling sounds on the interstate, and there's not crazy wind noise, and also the fact that it's turbocharged, I feel like from a mid-sized truck perspective, it's the best. However, I still think that some car manufacturer needs to release a mid-sized truck that gets that has a little bit more power, so you have a little bit more passing power and everything. That would be awesome.